It was senior year, and my buddy Billy and I were in for one seriously messed up night. Billy's folks were out of town. A golden opportunity for a party, right? His house was huge, perfect for a decent-sized bash. So naturally, we threw one. Nothing too wild, we thought, just a few dozen people from school, maybe 30 or 40 tops. Billy was my best friend, and we were practically neighbors. I lived just a couple of houses down the street. We spent the whole afternoon prepping, stashing anything breakable. His mom's prized porcelain collection went into a locked closet, and barricading the stairs to the upper floors with some thick rope and a hastily scribbled no entry sign. We wanted to keep the party contained to the main floor and the finished basement. The crew showed up all at once, right around 8 o'clock, and the party kicked off. It was a blast at first. Music was pumping downstairs, people were dancing and trying to start mosh pits, which Billy quickly shut down. And upstairs, a bunch of us were battling it out on Mario Kart and other games. There was the usual party chatter, people catching up, some awkward flirting happening in the corners. As the night wore on, though, I found myself needing to pee, really bad. Both bathrooms, the one on the main floor and the one in the basement, were occupied, with lines forming outside each. So I braved the freezing cold and snuck out back to relieve myself by a big, gnarled oak tree. While I was back there taking care of business, I glanced back at Billy's house. The place was lit up like a Christmas tree, with lights spilling out of every window. That's when I saw it. A flicker of light way up on the third floor. It was quick, almost like a candle being blown out, but I definitely saw it. I finished up and kept staring at the windows, straining my eyes in the darkness, and I could definitely make out someone moving around up there. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a distinct figure. When I got back inside, I found Billy near the makeshift snack table, trying to salvage some crushed chips. I pulled him aside and told him about what I'd seen. Remember, his parents were out of town on a cruise, and he didn't have any siblings living at home. So anyone up there was definitely uninvited, a total stranger. Billy's face went white. He figured someone from the party had ignored our flimsy barricade and gone exploring, maybe looking for a quieter place to hook up or something. I volunteered to go with him. There was no way we were going up there alone. We crept up the stairs, trying to be as quiet as possible, expecting to find some classmates making out or just messing around. We checked all the rooms on the second and third floors, each one empty, which just made the situation more unsettling. Finally, we reached his parents' bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. We exchanged a nervous glance, and Billy pushed the door open. And there he was, a guy, maybe in his 30s or 40s, rifling through the closet drawers. He had something covering his face, a dark bandana, I think. So we couldn't see much, but the thick carpet muffled our footsteps, and he clearly hadn't heard us coming. He spun around, startled, and suddenly he was pointing a gun right at us. A real gun. We froze, instinctively throwing our hands in the air, yelling, "Don't shoot!" He didn't say a single word. His eyes were cold and hard. He just gestured with the gun for us to move aside, away from the doorway, and then he bolted past us. As he went by, he smacked Billy across the face with the gun, a sickening thud, before sprinting down the hall, down the stairs, and out the front door. Some people in the living room saw him tear past them, a blur of dark clothing, and then vanish into the night. Looking back, we absolutely should have called the cops immediately. But we were just kids, throwing a party, and some underage drinking was definitely going on. We were terrified of getting in trouble, of our parents finding out. Billy's face healed up eventually, though he had a nasty bruise for weeks. But the whole experience, being held at gunpoint in his own house, that stuck with us. A dark shadow hanging over our senior year. We always wondered if it was just a random robbery gone horribly wrong, or if there was something else, something more sinister that we'd missed. Now, before we move on to the next story, if you're new and enjoyed this one, please subscribe. It helps us out a ton. If you want more chilling tales, hit that button. And with that said, let's get into our next story. This freaky thing happened to me way back in high school. I ended up at this all-boys boarding school, mainly because my older brothers, Mike and Dave, had gone there. It was kind of a family tradition, I guess. The school was perched on a hill in the middle of this tiny, one-stoplight town. The building itself was ancient, an old monastery, huge and imposing, with 4 stories, including a creepy basement with a boiler room and these long, winding hallways. Every student had a rotating chore to keep the place running, and at the time of this story, my duty was to clean the gym at night. My job was pretty simple. Sweep the floor, put away all the equipment, make sure everything was ready for the next day. The gym was split into 2 levels. The upper level was the weight room, and from up there, you could see most of the lower level, where the basketball court was. One night, I walked into the gym, ready to start my cleaning routine. As I got further inside, I noticed something weird, a basketball, slowly rolling across the polished wooden floor. I stopped dead in my tracks and scanned the room, looking for anyone who might be messing with me or any open doors that might explain it. But everything was locked up tight, and I was completely alone. I tried to convince myself it was just a draft or some random movement, and I was about to start sweeping when the ball kept rolling. It wasn't just rolling in a straight line, it was rolling in a wide circle, right around the gym, before stopping dead at my feet. Okay, that's not normal. My heart started pounding. I kept looking around, trying to figure out if someone was playing a prank or if there was some logical explanation, but there was nothing. Then I heard a creaking sound coming from the darkened upper level, the weight room. I peered into the shadows, and suddenly a girl came into view, standing near the railing. She stopped walking and just stared down at me. She looked about my age, maybe a little younger. Her expression was completely blank, and her eyes were wide, fixed on me. The moment our eyes met, she spun around and bolted down the stairs. What happened next was a scream, a blood-curdling, ear-splitting scream that I can't even begin to describe. It ripped through the silence of the old building and sent shivers down my spine. I instinctively backed up against the wall of the gym, completely freaked out. I didn't see her coming down the stairs, but I watched as she took a sharp left at the bottom and darted through the main gym doors, disappearing into the night. I knew I wasn't supposed to leave the school grounds after curfew, but curiosity, or maybe just pure terror, got the better of me. I had to know what was going on. I ran after her, out through the same doors and into the cold night air. I ran up some nearby steps that gave a good view of the surrounding area. I probably wouldn't have seen her again if it wasn't for a second scream, this one coming from out by the road. In the dim moonlight, I saw her sprinting down the hill, away from the school, until she vanished into the darkness. To this day, I've never experienced anything like it. I still don't know what to believe. Was she a real person, or was she some kind of ghost or spirit? The way the basketball moved was definitely supernatural, but the girl seemed so real. She pushed open the heavy gym doors like a normal person would, and I saw her running down the hill. It was all so confusing. I asked other students, teachers, even my brothers about it, but no one had any idea what I was talking about. They just brushed it off. I eventually graduated and left that school behind. It's actually been closed down for good now. I still wonder if any other students ever experienced anything similar before they shut the place down. It gives me the creeps just thinking about it. This seriously messed up thing happened when I was a junior in high school. Our school welcomed a foreign exchange student from Romania. We'll call him Alex. He was only at our school for about a month, but that month was intense. At first, I didn't think much of him. We'd hang out in the cafeteria sometimes, and he'd tell us stories about his life back home, but something always felt off, like a missing piece in the puzzle. The big red flag was that he never talked about his family. People would ask him about them, curious to learn more about his background, but he'd always change the subject, smooth as butter. It was weird. One week, we got paired up for a history project. As we worked on it throughout the week, I noticed he was constantly distracted. He'd pull out his phone and type like a man possessed, sometimes even recording angry voice memos in Romanian. It was unsettling. I asked him if everything was okay, trying to be a good classmate, but he just brushed it off, saying he was just checking in with friends back home. Yeah, right. Another thing that started to bug me was his sudden influx of nice stuff. He'd show up wearing expensive clothes or have some new gadget that made everyone wonder how he could afford it. I remember one day he rolled up to school on a brand new motorized scooter. It was top of the line. Since he never talked about his family, everyone just assumed they must be loaded and were sending him money or gifts to help him adjust to being in a new country. It seemed plausible at the time. Then, about a month after he started attending our school, the unthinkable happened. One day, police officers showed up during class. They pulled Alex out of the room, saying he was under arrest for credit card scams. That explained all the fancy stuff. We were all completely shocked, watching in disbelief as he tried to break free and escape from the cops. It was like a scene from a movie. But the real bombshell dropped later. It turned out he hadn't just been running a few credit card scams. He'd actually murdered someone back in Romania and stolen their identity. The real foreign exchange student, the one who was supposed to come to our school, was dead. This guy, this Alex we'd been hanging out with every day for a month, was a murderer and had committed a whole string of other crimes. And get this, he wasn't even 17 like he'd claimed. He was 25. 25 years old, pretending to be a high school junior. The whole thing was incredibly disturbing. Our school immediately put the foreign exchange program on hold. It was a really tough time for a lot of students, especially the ones who had become friends with him. We were all not only devastated about what had happened to the actual foreign exchange student, the one we never got to meet, but also completely freaked out that we'd spend a month at school with a dangerous criminal, someone capable of murder and deception on a massive scale. It was a truly bizarre and terrifying experience, and we were all just grateful that he was caught as quickly as he was. It makes you realize you never truly know who you're talking to. The summer after I graduated, I took a job as a janitor at my old high school. It was a pretty chill gig, mostly because the school was practically deserted. Most days, it was just me and a couple of the full-time janitors, guys like old Mr. Henderson and Pete. I usually worked alone since they had big summer projects they were tackling, like stripping and waxing the gym floor or deep cleaning the cafeteria. I was stuck with the smaller stuff, cleaning out lockers, wiping down desks, getting the classrooms ready for the new school year. One afternoon toward the end of summer, I was cleaning out lockers in the science wing, just minding my own business, when I heard someone approaching. Mr. Henderson and Pete had told me at lunch that they'd be working in the auditorium for the rest of the day, so I didn't expect to see them again. The school pool was open to the public during the summer, though, so it wasn't unusual to see people wandering around, either looking for the pool or just checking out the old stomping grounds. I watched as this guy rounded the corner, and when he saw me, he started walking toward me. He came right up and asked me for my keys, saying he needed to unlock a bathroom by the pool. Now, a couple of things. First, I wasn't about to hand my keys to some random stranger. Second, there was a lifeguard on duty at the pool who had keys and could easily unlock the bathroom or help him out. It just seemed fishy. I didn't want to be rude, though, so I told him I could walk with him and unlock the door myself. He flat out refused, insisting I just give him the keys and he'd bring them right back. Yeah, right. I told him again that I couldn't do that and suggested he talk to the lifeguard. That's when things got weird. He suddenly stepped closer to me, reaching for my keys, grabbing at the lanyard that was dangling out of my pocket. I quickly took a couple of steps back, thinking he'd stop, but he didn't. He actually started chasing me. I took off sprinting down the hallway, adrenaline pumping, trying to figure out what this guy's deal was. My first thought was to run to the auditorium, where I knew Mr. Henderson and Pete would be. But the guy was gaining on me, and I had to think fast. I realized I knew the school's layout way better than he did. So, I made a quick decision. I yanked open the door to the main office and ducked inside. The office was actually pretty big and confusing, with a bunch of different hallways branching off and 2 separate exits. It was the perfect place to lose someone. Just like I'd hoped, I was able to navigate through the maze of desks and file cabinets and slip out the second exit into a hallway on the other side, putting some distance between me and the key grabber. The auditorium was still on the opposite side of the school, though, and I wasn't sure I could outrun him that far. So I decided to hide. There was a storage closet nearby, the kind filled with old textbooks and cleaning supplies. I yanked the door open, slipped inside, and quietly shut the door behind me. I stood there in the dark, holding my breath, listening for him. Sure enough, about 10 or 15 seconds later, I heard the office door open. I could hear him moving around inside, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to control my breathing and not make a sound. I heard him walk past the closet several times, pacing back and forth outside. I think he was checking the classroom windows, looking to see if I'd hidden in one of them. Finally, the footsteps faded as he jogged down the hallway, still searching. I didn't even try to go to the auditorium after that. I was too freaked out that I'd run into him again. Instead, I quietly made my way back to the office and used the landline to call the police. They arrived pretty quickly, but the guy was long gone. They searched the school but couldn't find him. There were only 2.5 weeks left of summer, so I decided to call it quits and never went back to that job. It was a seriously creepy experience. It was junior year, just the usual high school grind. One afternoon, right in the middle of algebra, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It simply read, "I see you." At first, I just laughed it off. I figured it was a prank from one of my friends, maybe even some random kid trying to be funny. I didn't think much of it and just ignored it. But the next day, another message popped up. "You're not safe." Okay, that was a little less funny. I checked the number again, but it was still an unknown. It didn't seem like anyone I knew from school. The messages kept coming, each one more disturbing than the last. They started saying things like, "I know where you go to school, and you can't hide from me." My stomach started to churn. I wanted to tell someone, but I felt kind of silly. I didn't know who was sending them, and I wasn't sure what anyone could even do about it. The next day, sitting in history class, I noticed something weird. Mr. Harrison, our history teacher, was watching me. Like, really watching me. Mr. Harrison was a pretty strict teacher, always keeping an eye on everyone, so I tried to ignore it, not wanting to get called out for something I didn't even know I was doing. But the way he was looking at me was different. It was intense. As the week went on, the messages got even more personal. I started getting texts like, "I see you in the library," or "You're mine." That last one sent a shiver down my spine. The following Monday, I finally decided I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I went to our guidance counselor, Mrs. Evans, and told her everything. Later that day, after lunch, I went to the library to try and get some reading done. It was while I was sitting there, trying to focus on my book, that it hit me. Mr. Harrison was also in the library, sitting at a table in the corner, grading papers. I hadn't even noticed him at first, but now it felt like he was constantly watching me. Every time I glanced up, he was looking in my direction. It was unnerving. The thought that the creepy text could be coming from a teacher had never even crossed my mind, but now I was starting to seriously suspect him. The next day, after class, I decided to confront him. I walked up to his desk and asked him point blank if he was sending me the creepy texts. I also mentioned that I'd seen him watching me in the library. His whole demeanor changed. He got really defensive, his face turning red. He insisted he didn't know what I was talking about, and told me to leave his classroom immediately. After that unsettling conversation, I went straight to the principal's office and told him everything. I explained my suspicions about Mr. Harrison and showed him some of the texts. The next day when I got to school, Mr. Harrison was gone. The school made an announcement that he had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons and didn't give any other details. He never came back to our school, at least not while I was still there. I never found out exactly what happened to him, but the texts stopped the very day he disappeared. It was a terrifying experience, and I'm just glad it was over.